durable. Somebody else is to do it.
morning. Good morning. That's more like it. Thank you. Make sure you're awake. Welcome to the Hope Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, wherever you have been, for this hour, we here are one gathered congregation, and everyone, all y'all, are welcome. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. For those of you attending virtually, all the links to this service, including the order of service, are on our website and in this morning's worship service email. If you are here in the sanctuary this morning, take this moment to please silence your cell phones. My name is Brian Watson, and this fellowship holds a special place in my life. It is a community of loving people who I've found kinship and solidarity with. This community has supported me and my family when we needed help. And this community gives me many ways to contribute and pay it forward. We're getting some feedback on the mic. Our worship leader this morning is the Reverend Bruce Bode. Reverend Bode is the Minister Emeritus at the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend, a congregation he served for 14 years before retiring in 2018. Reverend Bode, welcome again to our pulpit. We're so glad you're here. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are visiting for the first time. Welcome. If you are here in person, we all would love to welcome you outside after the service. If you are attending virtually, please introduce yourselves after the service at our Zoom coffee hour. And everyone, whether virtual or in person, is welcome to attend our Zoom coffee hour directly after this service. The link is in the email that went out this morning and will show on your screen following the worship service. You need to use the password coffee with a capital C to be admitted to the coffee hour. The announcements are available on our website, www.QUUF.org, or in our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. And I just have to say that we are blessed today to have these beautiful flowers in our sanctuary. And is it Margaret Wilder? Are you here this morning? Where are you?
She's a greeter.
She's still out front. Aren't these flowers beautiful? Let's acknowledge Margaret when we see her later. And today we have a very special announcement. And I'd like to invite Robin Singh to come forward from the Ministerial Selection Committee to share it with us.
Good morning, everyone. So many of you may have seen in our the candle that goes out, and we had another email that went out that the Ministerial Search Committee did select a new contract minister, Reverend Crystal Zarefos, and we are very, very excited about having her join us. We were just very thrilled that she was one of the applicants. So she did, in this email you may have read, she did send a greeting to us. She will be starting August 1st. So I just wanted to read, for those of you that may not have seen the email or don't get the email, or people that might be visiting, I just want to read some excerpts from what she wrote. Greetings, Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Peace and blessings be with you. I am Reverend Crystal Zarefos, and I have the honor of serving as your new minister beginning August 1st. I am so excited to join you in shared ministry together this year. I look forward to getting to know you and joining you in many adventures. Here's a little bit about me as a way of an introduction. I grew up on the East Coast, moved to Washington and began my first career in social services, moved back to Pennsylvania, and returned to the West Coast to attend seminary at Seattle University School of Theology and Ministry, where I received my Master of Divinity. Ordained in 2019, I am currently in preliminary fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association and a member of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association. My previous service includes Interim Minister for First Unitarian Church of Portland in Portland, Oregon, Contract Minister for Community Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasco, Washington, Contract Minister for Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Juneau, Alaska, and various short-term ministries and internships. I've spent much of the pandemic times recovering from a traumatic brain injury, and I am excited to be returning to congregational ministry in earnest. I absolutely love being in the outdoors and feel most connected to the divine when I'm in, on, or near water. Unitarian Universalist to my core, I come from Christian roots and draw inspiration from Taoism and earth-centered spirituality, honoring the elements, seasons, and cycles of life. QUUF's mission to build a liberal religious community of love, justice, enriched by diversity that nurtures spirituality and inspires us to act on our beliefs is but one of the many things that have drawn me to this community, and I'm thrilled to join you in this mission. I love journeying with folks where they are, and I wholeheartedly believe it is always possible to love more. I look forward to meeting you and sharing in this ministry together. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Now, please stand as you're willing and able to sing our musical call to worship, hymn number 347 in the gray hymnal, Gather the Spirit. Brian Kinney is on the piano, and the vocals are done by Elena Hemingway on the video, but you're welcome to sing along. Again, please join in and sing Gather the Spirit.
Our separate fires will kindle.
Join me now in lighting our chalice. If you have your own chalice or candle at home, please light it as I read our chalice lighting words. These are a prayer from the East Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore for his country. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dread habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Now please join me in our spoken affirmation. The words will appear on the screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. And now I'd like to invite Melinda Hughes, our Director of Religious Education, to share our time for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you all. And I wanted to kind of hold up some people that you don't actually usually see. There are 7 or 8 children already up in the Mountain Building. So the older children are with us here, but those that are younger, kindergarten or younger, are up there. And this morning, I think I counted 7 heading up. And so it's just really exciting to see the young ones here. And I wanted to let you know that they're up there. So this morning, I'm going to talk about the 5th principle. So the children up in the Mountain Building, we've been talking about the Unitarian Universalist principles. So we have 1, each person is important. 2, be kind in all you do. 3, we're free to learn together. 4, in search for what is true. 5, all people need a voice. That's as far as I'm getting today, because today's story is about just that. So in children language, we say we believe that all persons should have a vote about the things that concern them. In adult language, we say we affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Something that can be challenging at times. So the principle tells us that we best make decisions together in ways that respect and listen to each other. We think everyone should have a say. And it's not only showing up for elections and voting, but also being involved in the future of our communities. Making sure our communities are places where all voices are heard. So today's story is titled Speak Up, and it's written by Miranda Paul and illustrated by Ebony Glenn. I have to raise it up just high enough, Mike, that the book doesn't hit it. All right. There are times we should be quiet. There are days for letting go. But when matters seem important, speak up. Let others know. With so many ways to speak up, like a sign, a smile, a shout, if we could make things better, why not let our words come out? When you're being introduced and they get your name all wrong, speak up. Say your name. You are you and you belong. When someone spreads a rumor and you're sure it isn't true, speak up, state the facts. Truth can open up our view. When a rule just isn't fair or has gotten much too old, speak up. Work for change. Justice comes when we are bold. When a person wounds another with their words or with their fists, Speak up. Be an ally. Safety comes when we persist. If you see someone who's lonely or they're having a bad day, speak up. Share a moment. Kindness goes a long way. When you make a small mistake, even if you didn't know, speak up. Say you're sorry. Learn to listen. Learn to grow. When you have a special day or you're given something neat, speak up. Shout your thanks. Gratitude makes life so sweet. When you're sad or packed with feelings and the world seems dark and gray, speak up. Ask for help. Friendship chases clouds away. When trees and creatures suffer from our quick and careless choices, speak up. Rally others. Nature needs our mindful voices. When you know a scary secret about someone getting hurt, speak up. Tell a grown-up. Courage sometimes means you blurt. When the group is taking one path, but you know it's not the way, speak up. Change directions. Leaders don't always obey. While some people speak up loudly, and your words might whisper quiet, one voice can make a difference, so don't hesitate. Go try it. So now, please join in singing our children out, and we'll head up to the Matin building.
Our next hymn, number 1028, The Fire of Commitment, is a lively piece from the Teal hymnal. The words are those of Mary Catherine Morn, written in 2002 for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville, Tennessee. The music is that of Jason Shelton, who served for 20 years as the Associate Minister for Music at the Nashville congregation. We will be led in singing by the vocalist Alina Hemingway, accompanied on the piano by Brian Kenny. Please stand as you're willing and able to sing hymn number 1028, The Fire of Commitment, in the Teal hymnal.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. For the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze. finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Now it is the time for our morning offering. If your offering is for QUUF, please put it into the envelopes in the baskets. Loose change, cash, or checks placed in the basket will go to this month's recipient of our charitable giving, our local food pantry, Bremerton Food Line. In 2021, Bremerton Food Line provided over 11,000 individuals with free food baskets. If this is your first time at QUUF, you are our guest, and there is no need to contribute. Let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us. Let's enjoy the gift of music from our pianist, Brian Kinney. Brian will play Improvisations, Movement 1 by Bela Bartok. Thank you so much, Brian. Now is the time in our service for sharing of joys and sorrows. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows are lessened. I have several to share with you today. From Jerry Butler, as well as from Julie Rogers some very sad news. Jim Brophy, husband of Judy Brophy, passed away peacefully on June 30th due to a stroke, with Judy and his daughter Sue by his side. And Judy is struggling with health issues right now and is being moved to Bremerton Rehab today. And she would appreciate all the love, any of the love that you can send to her. Our hearts are heavy with that loss. And from Rosemary Dougal, we recently learned that Reverend Don Vaughn Forrester, who served this congregation as a 2-year interim minister starting in 2010, died in June of 2021. He was a kind man who sincerely cared about the fellowship and its members, and we miss him. And we also, in the midst of our sorrow, remember our joys as well. This from Bonner Sams, that these overcast days just make the colors of my patio flowers vibrantly pop. A good reminder. And this from Cassidy Owen. We spent a week as a family on the Olympic Peninsula with no cell phones during daylight, and I finally started painting again. It was so renewing. That's wonderful news, Cassidy. And we light one last candle for those joys and sorrows that are still too tender to share. And please join me in a moment of prayer or intention. In the spirit of community, in which we find strength and common purpose, we share our joys, our sorrows, our hopes and dreams. We have turned our minds and hearts toward one another in trust, giving love, seeking comfort, and celebrating together. We are part of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. In all the moments of our lives, for those loved ones and events shared this morning, and for those we yet hold in the silence of our hearts, we are truly grateful for the love and support of this beloved community. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to us all. Amen, and blessed be. Please remain seated as we sing Spirit of Life, hymn number 123 in our gray hymnal. There's no need to stand for this hymn. For those at home, the words will appear on your screen.
Greetings to those of you who are attending virtually this morning, and greetings to all of you who are here. I find it deeply moving to be with people again. It's happened a couple other times, but it takes me by surprise again. So I'm really pleased to be here with you. And it's on this 4th of July weekend when we're called to celebrate the 246th anniversary of the founding of our country and to reflect on the principles and values upon which our country was founded. I think we're called this weekend to measure ourselves with respect to those principles and values and to consider what adjustments might be needed to make our nation, as the saying goes, a more perfect union. Well, my sermon this morning, in large part, will have to do with our nation's principle of religious liberty, freedom of religion. It's a principle that leads to religious pluralism, that is, to the embrace, the acceptance, the toleration of a variety of different faith perspectives. And in my message this morning, I'm going to be drawing heavily on the work of the Reverend Dr. Forrest Church. He was a ministerial colleague of mine, now several years deceased, I think he served for about 30 years as the senior minister of the All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City. And Forrest, I knew him personally, was a prolific author. He always had 2 or 3 books going at once, so that over the course of his life, he wrote or co-wrote 25 different books. This is at the same time he's a senior minister of a congregation. And in the very last of these books, written shortly before his death in 2009 at the age of 61, he presented to me what to me is a stunning illustration of the need for and the difficulty of embracing a pluralistic or universalistic perspective in religion. So my reading this morning is from the introduction of this book. It's titled The Cathedral of the World, a Universalist Theology, and you'll be able to follow the words of this fairly lengthy reading on your screens, both here and in your homes. And I want to thank Tanisha Smith for her very fine work in providing images for this reading. So if we could begin with the slides. So Forrest Church writes, "Universalism speaks with particular eloquence to the challenge of our times. Today, our neighbors live not only across the street, but across the world as well. During an age when we share a global economy and communication system in addition to nuclear and environmental threats, universalism addresses our era's most dangerous dysfunction, theological parochialism. Every denomination, including my own Unitarian Universalist Association, can fall prey to such nearsightedness. To fulfill its promise, modern universalism must witness against fundamentalists on the left as well as those on the right. By definition, universalism is not the property of any discrete religious body, including those that included in their names. To illustrate this point, which pivots at the center of my theology, let me take you on a brief journey. We shall walk together to the water's edge and follow the light of the moon wherever it may lead. We are standing on the shoreline of a mountain lake, moonlight lapping against our boot tips, mesmerized by the golden carpet laid out over the water as if lowered from the heavens to meet us at the very place we stand. Before us, along the moon's glorious trail, we can see all the way to the lake's rocky bottom. Above the sunken branches, we watch the water dance and sparkle, a rack of moonbeams on each ripple's crest. Across the lake, where the moon is rising, our path turns to liquid gold. Standing on the shore some distance to our right, a man contemplates the same view, yet appears shrouded in darkness. To our left stands a woman, her silhouette all but obscured by the blackness that envelops her. Pondering these two apparently benighted people, we wonder to ourselves, what can they possibly be thinking? encompassed by darkness, the lake before them flat and lifeless. If only they would join us at the foot of the moon's luminous path, they too could bathe in celestial light. Henry David Thoreau once chastised the Florentine artist and adventurer Benvenuto Cellini for mistaking the aura he saw surrounding his shadow on a dew-drenched day as a special sign of divine recognition. In the moonlight, we experience a like illusion, as do the man and woman to our right and left, who share our vision, though we perceive them to be in darkness. Judging only by what they see, they too may feel themselves uniquely illumined. To their eyes, it is we who appear to languish in darkness. Expressive of both the wonder and danger of religion on the one hand, the moon's golden light extends a path across the lake to the feet of everyone who stands under the spell of its supernal glow. On the other, given that each onlooker sees only his or her own golden pathway, all others standing in apparent darkness, we are left with the impression that we walk the one true path alone, whereas those who fail to join us are lost. Here nature can serve as our theological tutor. She reminds us that in almost every way that matters, we and our most distant neighbors, sprung from a single source and sharing the same destiny, are one. This revelation encapsulates the essence of Universalist theology. To perceive things as they are, not merely as they appear, we must view them with parallax vision. We must imagine seeing things through others' eyes as well as through our own. As part of our time of meditation, I invite you now to listen to and to take in the tune and lyrics of a familiar hymn that picks up on this notion from the reading I just gave of the idea of parallax vision, that is, the effort to try to see things through the eyes of others. It's a hymn that's found in our gray hymnal. It's titled, "This Is My Song," and the tune originally was named Finlandia. It was part of an 1899 symphonic piece by the Finnish composer Jan Sibelius. He later reworked it as a standalone piece, and it's not the official anthem of Finland, but it's certainly one of their most important national songs. And the words that you will hear sung and that are in our hymnal are those of Lloyd Stone. They were written in 1939 as an international song of peace, and they are going to be evocatively rendered by Alina Hemingway, accompanied by Brian on the piano. And that will lead us into our time of silence, which will conclude with a brief piano response by Brian.
This is my song, O God of all the nations.
Again, I find that rendering by Alina, I can't get through it without tears. Thank you. Well, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, of which this Kitsap congregation is a part, is, I would say, a quintessentially American religious organization. And this is because the principles, values, and ideals that we hold dear in our religious association have also been the core principles, values, and ideals of our American democracy, which, as we know all too well now, are currently under threat and in peril. And so this morning, on this 4th of July weekend, I'd like to explore with you those core principles, values, and ideals of our American experiment in governance. And I would raise up 3 foundational precepts of what has been what I would call our national faith, namely religious liberty, religious toleration, and religious pluralism. Ours, as Forrest Church writes in another book, The American Creed, a Spiritual and Patriotic Primer, ours has been the first nation to experiment in a far-reaching manner with these principles, values, and ideals. No other nation before us has ever tried to construct its civic life with these as its central organizing principles. No other nation has put forward religious pluralism as the source of its unity. No other nation has had as its motto the words e pluribus unum, out of many, one. As Forrest Church puts it in his book, The American Creed, quote, e pluribus unum cut directly against the grain of all previous human experience. One over many was familiar to history, as was over many a few, and also some apart from others. But out of many one, that had no historical precedent. Nor had any other nation sought to disestablish religious institutions, that is to say, to separate the institutions of religion and government, as opposed to having the government support and sponsor a given religion. And no other nation had declared, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, people, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson, the primary author of those words, also added the following statement in his first inaugural address in 1801, and if you were watching earlier as the slides were coming up before the service, those were his words, which include these. He said, equal and exact justice for all, of whatever state or persuasion, religious or political. Now, the fact that these principles of religious liberty and equality came to be at the center of our civic life may be due largely to the particular and peculiar historical circumstances in which they were formed. Originally, the various groups forming the colonies desired religious freedom, but it was religious freedom to establish their own religion and not, in most cases, religious freedom for others or religious freedom for all. However, historical circumstances created a need to join together in common cause to combat a common enemy that had its own established religion. And thus some would describe the development of the separation of the institutions of religion and government and the principles of religious liberty and religious pluralism that it promotes. Some would describe this as a happy accident, while others would describe it as a divinely guided plan. But whatever the case, once in place, these principles, values, and ideals seem so right that they have influenced and continue to influence nations around the world, and this despite the fact that they have so often been abridged in practice in our own country. Forrest Church's book, here it is, The American Creed. It's a spiritual and patriotic primer. I quoted from it earlier. That book is, in my judgment, one of his very finest books. It was published in 2002 in the aftermath of 9/11. And in this book, Forrest speaks of what he regarded as the primary elements of this American creed. And it's somewhat ironical that a minister for a religion like ours that prides itself in being non-creedal would speak of an American creed, but this is what he said. If I could have the slides, please. Creed sounds forbidding and ecclesiastical. The American creed is neither, but it is monumental. Creeds have to be monumental, struck in metal that when refined in the furnace of history and burnished by developing thought can endure the trials of time. They have to be steadfast enough to redeem history itself, reawakening tired minds, rekindling passion in hearts grown weary. Creeds are spiritual touchstones. They are finished in fire, yet cool to the touch when passed from hand to hand, one generation to the next. Capturing the essence of the American experiment, the American Creed affirms those truths our founders held self-evident: justice for all, because we are all created equal, and liberty for all, because we are all endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. America's fidelity to this creed is judged by history. Living up to it remains a constant challenge. But it invests our nation with spiritual purpose if we honor its precepts, a moral destiny. So as Forrest Church speaks of it, there is a kind of civic religion, and I would term that an umbrella civic religion, that has a creed above and beyond the creeds and faith positions of both religious organizations and individual faith perspectives. And here's where things get a little tricky, because religious organizations are those social organizations which, if they're doing their job, are addressing, fostering, and promoting one's deepest beliefs, one's highest loyalties, and one's ultimate allegiances. One's religion relates to one's total world and life view, one's vision of how things should, of how things ought to be, and thus one's religion cannot be cordoned off into some compartment or another. So this is the challenge for a nation that would grant freedom of religion to its citizens. How does it manage a plurality of ultimate loyalties? How does it keep the competing visions and truth claims of the religions from being at each other's throats? So what this says to me is that the principle of freedom of religion does not stand independently. The freedom is not an absolute freedom. It exists, of course, in relationship with the freedom of others. This also means to me that to be part of a country with freedom of religion, there must be, as I am saying, a kind of umbrella civic religion that gets buy-in, even if grudgingly, from the various religions and faith perspectives under its umbrella protection. Thus, such umbrella civic religion has to do first with a principle of toleration. No stone throwing as Forest Church puts it, through the windows of the mosques, temples, churches, synagogues, and meeting houses where the light of truth shines in upon the disparate faith communities. And secondly, as part of the practice of toleration, there must also be a quality of humility. A humility that understands that as strongly as I believe and think I am right, I'm also aware that I'm a fragment of the whole, and that I view the whole of reality through the lens of that fragment. Or to use an analogy, in the same way that we recognize that the language we speak, though it may be best for us, is not the only language nor the best for everyone. So also, to preserve our nation's freedom of religion, we must also have the humility to recognize that our particular religion, our particular world and life view, even though it has to do with ultimates, ultimately remains our take on those ultimates. This brings me back to that Latin phrase, e pluribus unum, out of many one. Until 1956, it was our American motto, and it's a phrase that succinctly expresses, I think, what has been at the heart of our national faith, which, as it happens, also expresses the heart of Unitarian Universalist faith and its embrace of religious pluralism. The Universalist side of our tradition speaks to the plurality and diversity of our faith, e pluribus, out of many. And the Unitarian side of our tradition speaks to the unity of our faith, unum, oneness. Because our religion embraces the triple values of religious liberty, religious toleration, and religious pluralism, and because we have some practice in trying to live out those principles, values, and ideals in our religious community, and because we have a long tradition of upholding and defending these principles, values, and ideals in our nation, I would contend that we have a special obligation in these times, each in our own way, to witness to these principles, values, and ideals of our national faith. And in regard to being such witnesses, let me conclude with a final thought, which has to do with our understanding of what religious liberty, religious toleration, and religious pluralism mean and to whom they apply. It's the idea that our understanding of these principles, values, and ideals expands evolutionarily over time. Viewed by hindsight and with the passage of time, we can see quite clearly a number of the shortcomings and blind spots of our forebears in their understanding and application of the principles, values, and ideals that they themselves put forward. It's a little tougher in the present, of course, for one to see one's blind spots, and a bit more difficult to see how future generations will look at us, will judge us. That might incidentally encourage us to both look more charitably at the past, as well as to conduct ourselves a little bit more humbly in the present. And in this regard then, there's another principle from our tradition, which I like to suggest that we keep before us, and it's captured in the words of a maxim: revelation is not sealed. Revelation is not sealed. In other words, our understanding of truth is not final and fixed, but it's evolutionary. It unfolds over time. The 19th century American poet James Russell Lowell expressed that evolutionary principle with this poetic quatrain. He said, "New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. They must upward still and onward who would keep abreast of truth. Time makes ancient good uncouth. New occasions teach new duties. I want to conclude with an email I received a couple of years ago from Roger Anderson. He's a member of the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend, where I was a minister. And his email was written and sent in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd in the spring of 2020. And it's an email in which he speaks of his own grappling with the notion that Revelation is not sealed in relation to the meaning of our American Independence Day, which we celebrate tomorrow. Actually, I read this same letter to you from my home study 2 years ago when I was speaking to you from at that time, around this same time of the year. And I'm grateful now to have a chance to read it to you in person. So could we have the slides for this reading? And I do quote this with Roger Anderson's permission. This is what he wrote. Dear friends, the 4th of July has long held a special place in my heart. I suspect the spectacle alone was enough to get my attention as a child. But soon I began to appreciate that something special had happened in 1776. The world really did start to change. On July 4 each year, we usually pause long enough to recall the familiar language that we are all created equal and have unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. White males like me usually have stopped there, complacent and self-righteous, proud to be Americans. But this year, all of us are challenged to figure out how to respond to overlapping crises that have disproportionately fallen on Americans of color: police killings, COVID-19 deaths, and unemployment. These effects have many causes, but a central factor is how our society is structured. The Declaration itself offers guidance for how to proceed. Among other self-evident truths, it notes that, quote, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of securing these unalienable rights, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. For nearly 250 years, we have been able to avoid abolishing our government. Instead, we restructure our flawed democracy to meet new understandings of how governments ought to relate to citizens. Awakened by nationwide calls for change, we now have both the opportunity and the duty to build on those uneven experiences. We must be willing to honor our founding principles by again reorganizing our governments at all levels to better ensure those fundamental rights. We are yet again called by Lincoln to dedicate ourselves to bringing to our country a new birth of freedom. Amen, so may it be. The words of our concluding hymn, We'll Build a Land, are based on the words of the Hebrew prophets Isaiah and Amos. The music is that of Carol McDade, known not only through this hymn in our hymnal, but even more in our Unitarian Universalist circles as the composer of Spirit of Life, which we sang earlier. So would you please stand as you're willing and able to sing We'll Build a Land, and please remain standing for the closing words and the extinguishing of the chalice. Before we close, I'd like to express appreciation to the many individuals who have contributed to this service. Our service and script organizer, Rosemary Dougal, our lay leader, Brian Watson, our storyteller, Melinda Hughes, our musicians, Mike Menifee, Brian, and Alina, our technicians, Tanisha Smith, Marcy Mathis, and also Mike. And if I missed some, would you please express my appreciation? I really like and appreciate how you've worked with me for prepare this service. Thank you so much. My closing words of benediction are those of the late congressional representative John Lewis. These are his final words. They were written as a short essay titled, "Together You Can Redeem the Soul of Our Nation." This was sent to the New York Times 2 days before his death on July 17, 2020, with the request that they be read on the day of his funeral, which turns out to have been July 30. These words, he said, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting into what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring." We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Brian.
After the service is over today, please immediately exit through the foyer to the outside. You are encouraged to greet each other outside where we have the fresh air. Coffee and tea will be served outside on the breezeway between this building and our other building. All who are attending from home or elsewhere are invited to greet each other during our virtual coffee hour on Zoom. Again, the link to join is in this morning's email. The password is coffee, spelled with a capital C. Thank you so much, Reverend Bode, and may we all go in peace.